Hi, this is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau. I'm here with Jack Peterson here at the Arizona Department of Agriculture. This is our fourth in a series on I'm kind of calling it the Listen and Learn, what we can discover about this very important agency here in the state of Arizona, the Department of Agriculture. And across the country, every state, sometimes they have obviously different names, but every state has an ag department or an agriculture department. But Jack, I at first said the fourth victim after three previously, but really what you are is a set of leaders within the Arizona Department of Agriculture doing the things that you do to protect our food supply, to protect our consumers. And I'm fascinated to get in and to learn about you. So for those that are joining us live, thank you for hanging out with us. And also, if you watch this later, we're also going to keep it on Instagram, and we're also going to share it on Arizona Farm Bureau's website, azfb.org. In the meantime, if you have any questions or you just want to say hi to Jack, feel free to do that, because Joel Carr, who's always hanging out with me as we do these across the state, he'll raise his hand and give me a signal that there's somebody that has a question. Don't worry if you don't have one. Anyway, Jack, thank you for joining us. Thank you for making yourself available. I know you have a busy schedule, but I want to find out about you. I know that you're the Assistant Director of Environmental and Consumer Protection Services. That's your division. But let's start out about finding out about your background.
Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this too, and hopefully we'll get some information out that folks are, want to know about, or they'll learn something about us. So my background, I grew up working on a family farm in Minnesota.
Awesome.
And then I went to school and worked in North Dakota for 15 years, and came down here in 1994. So I've been here over 30 years with the Department of Agriculture, and I've been in all the roles. I think I've overseen each of the divisions. I was interim director for a while, so it's been over. I've got a degree in agricultural engineering from North Dakota State University. Nice, go Bison,
Go Bison.
national champions, NCAA football again. So
Congratulations.
We were blessed to be able to come down here to Arizona 30 years ago and raise our kids, and it's been a pleasure for us. So
how many kids do you have?
We have two.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
And two grandkids. That's even better.
Oh, awesome. We were talking, the younger generation, we were saying that they don't call mom and dad on the phone anymore. They text you.
Yeah, it's crazy. We could get this done, in seconds, but we're going to have to text back and forth. You have to wait to get the answer.
Yeah, I love it. So North Dakota, go Bison. And I know I'm not saying it quite right, but
it's cool.
But hey, contrast in climates. What brought you out to Arizona?
Okay, it's interesting because it was 30 years ago, so things have changed a lot, I'm sure. But it was I'm going to talk about things that were the same as the agriculture community is good.
Yeah.
And there's a goodness about people in the agriculture world that a lot of people don't realize. When you live in the city, it's all about me and getting in line first, and all that kind of stuff. The differences that really struck me when I came down here, and as I continue now, is the intenseness of agriculture and the labor needs that are here. Because the folks here in Arizona are growing the food that we eat. You're eating a salad, you're eating the vegetables. This time of the year, it's coming from Arizona, and it's that was really different. And when I first got hired, I was interviewing Bill Scott, who's passed away, but he was telling me about cotton, and it was just like, wow, there's so much for cotton production, and then
I love that family, by the way, and I remember Bill Scott. Yeah.
And then you move on, and then you get into all the vegetable production and how intense it is, and what goes into this. And fortunately, in the state again, we have a good extension service,
right,
which provides awesome information to the agriculture community. So. And
Minnesota, where your farm family grew up and did their farming, I mean, it gets cold in the winter.
Yeah. I guess that's a real blessing of coming down here, is you get away from that. But up north, when it's winter, you stay inside, and here in the summer when it gets hot, you try to stay inside.
Yeah.
It's just you
It's
switch
a complete
seasons. Yeah.
reversal.
Yeah.
What did you guys grow on your farm?
Corn and soybeans.
Awesome.
That's what it was. Corn, soybeans. Corn, soybeans. That's what it was.
Thank your family for feeding us.
Yeah.
That's all important stuff.
Yeah.
So let's get into finding out about what your department does. What is the Environmental and Consumer Protection Division?
Okay. Well, first off, this is just a recent change, of course. That's kind of, it's kind of nice that we're doing this because it's kind of an introduction of what we are. And so we are, there's several things that I guess to tell folks what we do. And it's the environmental part is that's, ensuring that pesticides are being used properly and make that the worker community is being provided the appropriate protections as required by law. And that goes on both the ag side and the non-ag side. And I know you're going to talk to some of those folks, the overseers of those areas in the coming weeks. And then we do also consumer protection. So if you think I'm going to feed, fertilizer, pesticides, or seeds, and think of those in your broadest terms.
Okay.
So like people always think, Department of Agriculture feed, it's like cattle feed. No, we're talking dog food, goldfish food, iguana food, the total spectrum of that.
So say that again. Those are the areas that you're
It's feed, fertilizer, pesticide, and seed.
Okay.
And so in fertilizer, same thing. You put that little fertilizer stake in your plant at home, or it's the big bulk bags that are going out on the fields. Seeds, the little packet that you buy at home to plant your flowers, or it's the big, sacks of seeds that are going out into the fields again. So, it's just this really broad spectrum. So what we do with those is there's standards set across the country, kind of. And so all these products are supposed to have certain labeling information for you as the general public, so you know what you're getting. And again, that's across all these commodities. And then we go out and we will look at these things in the marketplace to look at those labels to make sure they are providing the information they're supposed to. We also look at it from the standpoint of a even playing field. All these products, if these companies are selling them here, they're supposed to be licensed here. So we just can't have people just running in and selling stuff and junk that we don't want. And then finally, the most important part is we sample these materials. We'll take samples, we'll bring them into the state agriculture lab, and the state agriculture lab will analyze those products to ensure that what the label says, if it says you're supposed to be getting 15% protein in that dog food, the lab is going to ensure that that label has 15% protein.
Okay.
So one of the things I always throw out here is because people are unknown is we go out and we do a pool chlorine normally in about, June, July time frame.
Because you're going to be using more chlorine.
Because people are going to be using, pool parties and all that kind of stuff. Pool chlorine, liquid pool chlorine is a habitual failure. It fails so regularly. And that's, so what we do is we go out and we sample it, the lab runs it, and if it fails, we can issue a stop sale on it. And that's what our intent is, to make sure that is getting off the marketplace so you as a consumer aren't paying money for a product that isn't what you should be getting. If it says it's 10% product and we're going in there and we're finding it's at 6%,
it's not meeting it's not meeting
correct.
what it's selling.
Correct.
Thank you guys for doing that.
And so we do that across the state, and we have currently we have 6 inspectors in our division.
Oh, God bless you guys. Do you ever feel like you're scrambling to get it all done? Because if you've got to cover those 4 areas, so a lot of this is random sampling to make sure what the label says is actually accurate under the microscope at the lab.
Yes.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yes, yeah.
But you're literally doing that.
Yeah, okay. and a little more planning goes into it than that, but it's because we try to, think of that gamut again for each one of these, from the agriculture down to the small little deal that you're using at home. We want to make sure that we're protecting the agriculture community. We want to make sure we're protecting the general homeowners. We want to make sure that we're protecting, if it's disinfectant, is a dairy getting what it needs to clean things up there. So there's so many things out there to sample, and we just touch the tip of the iceberg on that, because
But you probably have found some areas where what the label said was actually not the contents of the package.
Oh yeah. I just pool chlorine is the
Is the
poster
worst.
child.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
seriously, the
Now,
liquid
why is
chlorine.
that?
Well,
Because it degrades over time?
correct. That's
Okay.
that's the issue. It degrades in light and heat. And
Okay.
so I've always said, oh, you want to make sure when you go and buy pool chlorine, you want to ask people, where are you storing this chlorine?
Okay.
It's in the air conditioned building. But then there's, but that's not always the answer, because you can look at these big box stores and they bring in a pallet of chlorine and boom, it's gone. So,
Yeah.
even though it's sitting outside, it's only been sitting there for a little while and it quickly moves off the shelves. But that's why you can't
generalize.
You can't generalize.
Okay.
But it is all about the proper storage of that material and keeping it out of the light, keeping it out of the heat, and then you'll get what you want. So
How many are in your department?
So in the entire environmental and consumer protection division, there's about 30 people.
Okay.
So
And they're not all inspectors,
No.
because you said that you only have, well, okay,
Yes.
so maybe
Yes.
in the best case world, and financial resources weren't always the constraint of, state agencies. How many would you like?
Well, let me tell you, when I started here in '94, we had 13 inspectors, and now we have 6. So it's our government hasn't grown here, and Arizona's, we're independent people, and we don't like big government, and so. But part of that is, the cost of everything has gone up. So our budget hasn't grown. Our budget has stayed kind of flat. So that means you can't keep, everything.
Yeah.
You just have to have less of everything. And the same goes for, you look at, 3 of those inspectors of the 6 are dedicated to the non-food quality assurance program, which is the feed, fertilizer, pesticide, and seed. And so they're the ones that are going out and doing all this sampling. So really, we got 3 people that are trying to cover the state and do all these sampling of these materials and bringing them to the lab. So
are they always on the road then?
Well, I wish I could say yes, but the answer is no. And the reason for that is the amount of samples that we get. The lab has to be able to analyze.
Okay.
So we could just blow the doors off the lab, probably. Well, like you said, if we had people on the road all the time gathering samples, and could the lab handle them? And that's part of where I said, we try to make sure that we're touching all areas of the marketplace out there, so we're protecting everyone. And also, it's something for the efficiency of the lab in doing their analysis. We want to gather like materials so that we're not going out and, we're going to buy product A that has, this kind of seed or this product, and we're going to do nitrogen percentage analysis, and then we're going to go out and grab this pesticide with this active. We try to gather the same thing, so when the lab is set up to do these samples, they can run a whole bunch of batch of the materials at the same time, just for their efficiency, and I guess it gets things done quicker, so we can get back to the stores, et cetera, on where the samples are at. So.
Right. Well, now I'm going to kind of ask a controversial question.
Sure.
So, it seems like that permission to operate situation with agriculture and our use of the application of pesticides and stuff seems like the public tells us that we need to dial it back, or our leadership tells us. So what happens if we dialed it back? What happens if and you can tell this, you've been dealing with this forever. And I can speak to my own family farm. My dad did not pour a bunch of chemicals on his plants. He applied to the label and or had a certified pesticide applicator guy apply to the label, because number one, pesticides are expensive. So
there's so much we could talk about with this.
I know, I could spend the whole day on it.
So first off, let's talk about pesticides, how they come about.
Okay.
These products to be used, there's millions and millions of dollars spent on getting these products registered for use. And that includes all these safety analysis, residue, what kind of residues are they leaving, if any, in the crops. And so the companies that register these products spend millions and millions of dollars, and they submit all this data to the EPA. The EPA reviews it and makes sure that what they've done is right and are the tolerances correct. And again, all this is they're setting these tolerances because they do it in a way that says, okay, if this has this amount of product in it, residue level, in your lifetime, you'll be safe eating that.
Okay.
That's what
that's what all the testing is for.
And part of the reason people don't like pesticides is pesticide regulation in itself is not like other environmental programs. Other environmental programs, it's keep this out. We're just going to stop this. Pesticide is a risk-benefit analysis.
Okay.
Is there, and I'm not smart enough to know how they all do it, but basically the benefits of using that product have to outweigh the risks. And they also they set labeling restrictions on those products to ensure that that product is used properly, which helps to lower the risks as well. And that's how they mitigate the risks, is through the label.
So why do we use pesticides at all then? Do we really need them? Look at organics. They don't use pesticides.
And that's always, people, I buy organic, because I'm not going to get, there are no pesticides for me. But what people don't understand is organic agriculture uses pesticides as well. The difference is that they have to meet certain specifications that are allowed for organic agriculture. So there are pesticides used in organic agriculture as well. So that's not an out. Now, it's a really long story, but modern agriculture, industrial agriculture, we're here today because of what happened. Back in the 60s, the Green Revolution. And, part of that was as we're growing crops and they're more intense, you need to be able to control the pests. And pesticides were that modern answer to that. I'm not opposed to organic. I'm not opposed to not using pesticides. But if we want to continue to feed the world, we need to be able to use these pesticides to control these pests. You stated it. These things aren't cheap. People aren't going to go out, well, it says I'm supposed to apply 1 ounce per acre. I'm going to apply 2 ounces per acre because I want to. That's not the way it works. And that's what our inspectors are doing as well. They're out there monitoring these inspections, monitoring these applications to ensure as an applicator that you're using the product according to those label directions. If it says 1 ounce, you're not using more than 1 ounce.
Right. Oh, tell me the story about rotenone.
Oh, yeah, it was just...
we had a side conversation beforehand. This started.
Yeah. So, again, we're talking about organic, and rotenone is a product that is used...
Sanctioned to be able to use.
Yeah.
Okay.
And rotenone, people, what they think about is they use rotenone to kill lakes. When there's an invasive species or something, oftentimes fish or whatever, they'll use rotenone to kill the fish. And there's a lot of cautions that you got to use and all this kind of stuff. But then as I was looking at this, rotenone was a product that could be used in organic agriculture. I was surprised by that, and it was wow. You're on one side it's this tremendous concern, but then like you were saying, well, I like organic, so I'm well, maybe that's not the best solution.
Yeah. And for the record, I do like organic. Oh, and yeah. I use and like you said, you like it too. Mm-hmm. And I buy a lot of organic, and sometimes that's really your only like if you have a choice between it. A lot of times when I get my bag of spinach, it's organic. Yeah. So I celebrate. I love it. I'm like you. I love all methods of farming. Mm-hmm. But what I think we as a society, we're not out there boots on the ground farming. And farming is complicated. And it takes a lot to farm. One of the things, too, is that as I've working for the Arizona Farm Bureau, and it's just natural because I talk to people like mm-hmm. you, and then I talk to my farmers and ranchers, my organic, my conventional, my biodynamic farmers. That the regenerative farming is kind of coming back, even though it was 100 years ago. Yeah. Your parents, your family mm-hmm. in Minnesota was probably doing a lot of that regenerative, and so that's kind of coming back in the forefront, using a lot more of those natural or organic matter mm-hmm. to influence mm-hmm. and impact the soil, the health of the soil. So I celebrate it all, but one of the things that really struck me as to why this is so critical now that we're at a scale where we're actually feeding ourselves, feeding the nation, and then have carryover, and then feeding the world. And to your point, scaling to that, it's going to attract more bugs. And they said we lose at least different sources have said that we lose at least 35% of our agriculture to pests. And so whether that's a small farm and maybe you're a backyard gardener, all the way up to my dad, who was managing 1,600 acres on his own farm, and then was also managing the Maricopa Agricultural Center's demonstrations farm. So, sure. I mean, at one time, easily 5,000 acres. Most people would say that that's large agriculture, quote unquote, industrial agriculture. So that's one of the reasons we have to use properly, by the label, by instructions, pesticide.
Oh, that's so on, and it's, I always, what are people willing to give up?
Right.
And not only from the, I said we like our vegetables and we like our lettuce in the winter. Are you willing to give that up? Also, if you're not willing to give that up, are you willing to go out and start walking fields and dealing with weeds and hoeing out the weeds? Are you willing?
Because that is a pest.
It is a pest,
yeah.
Exactly. So there's so many things there, and unfortunately, as a society, I mean, this is getting philosophical. Was my kids, at least they got to go out to the farm a few times when they were still little, but they really grew up away from the farms, and everyone has lost that connection with the farm and agriculture, and everybody just goes to the grocery store and they think everything's going to be there. It doesn't happen by itself. It happens because of agriculture, and these agriculture producers are the thing that was, earlier we talked about uniform between North Dakota and Arizona is they're entrepreneurs. They're going to figure out a way to make these things work. It's like government, oftentimes we can be a barrier. It's what for the greater good of public. But, the growers are going to figure out a way. How are we going to do this? We got to do that, but we got to make sure we're doing this too. Right. And that's what in both states it's like that. Growers are amazing right. people.
One thing too is that permission by the public to do whatever. No, don't use pesticides on your farm. But you had some good metaphors about, or not metaphors, but actual reality. Don't use pesticides. But I go out and what were some of the examples?
It's funny how people, you can't be doing this, but as I live in my house, I see an ant, I'm going to spray that pesticide. Yeah. Oh, my pool, it's starting to turn green. Oh, I'm going to throw in some chlorine. Oh, that's a pesticide. So it's a way you look at that in reverse and say, okay, you as a homeowner, you say all these agriculture community folks can't use any pesticides. You as a homeowner, are you willing to stop doing that?
Yeah.
We don't look at it that way, and it's.
I have a funny story to that you might enjoy, and those that are listening. So, family friends of mine, their daughter. I said, yeah, she can rent a room in my house. Well, she saw one of those stink bugs, and she's got all scared. Yeah. And I said, well, there is some, I think, raid or whatever under the sink.
Yeah.
But she took that and she just kept spraying it.
Drowned it.
The bug was drowned. And then I'm like, okay, application level, tolerance level, I think, parts.
Yeah.
So it was pretty funny. And that's not an unusual story. So even though the public is telling us what we can and can't do, and they have no concept of agriculture, and yet they turn right around and pour the chlorine in and everything else in their pool. And we are chemical composition, whether it's organic, there's a chemical composition to all of us. You and I are basically made up of chemicals. So it's kind of an interesting little dynamic that's going on. And if we don't talk about this, people, it's going to be easy for them. And even the tolerance levels. So those measurement instrumentations are in the parts per million, parts per billion,
parts per trillion. I mean, it's crazy how minuscule you can. That's one of those things that we talked about too. The tolerance levels. There's pesticides in these foods. Yeah, at a parts per trillion, do people realize how small a part per trillion is? I mean, look it up online. I mean, there's all kinds of examples. It's but we're going crazy about this.
Right. Somebody made the comparison of like one little drop from an eyedropper dropped into an Olympic pool.
Yeah, that's probably parts per million.
Yeah, the parts per million instrumentation are identified on that. So that's kind of crazy. But one thing that I was struck with your background and then what you do here, so a lot of this is about pesticide regulation.
Yeah. Yep.
So we've talked a little bit about why this is so important. Is there anything we've so far left out?
Well, the only thing I guess I would throw out there is, people know that we are out there, both in the agriculture side and the non-agriculture side, looking over these pesticide applications, monitoring them, making sure they are done correctly. The information that goes into the registration of these pesticides and the relative safety of them, and you have to be exposed, for there to be any kind of consequence. So, these people making applications in a field, half a mile away, it's not really going to affect you. So, people sometimes come unglued with things like that. Let's see what else. Just had one of those mind warps.
That happens to me all the time.
You reach a certain age, and then
it's like, wait a minute, what was I about to say?
Yeah.
Pesticide regulation.
Oh yeah. So I grew up. My dad was a state trooper.
Oh, cool.
And so he was one of the things that he was always, and I try to do that. You need to be fair. And although we are a regulatory agency, we try to educate. That's always always on an educational road. That's what we want to do. Even if we are regulating, we're going to be educating as well. And so that's what we try to do. And the agriculture community or the non-agriculture community actually wants us to regulate. Because when somebody does
My dad, the farmer, wanted you to help regulate.
Yes, because if the guy down the road is doing something stupid, what's going to make the headline? That your dad is doing it right, or the guy down the road who's doing something stupid?
The guy down the road doing something stupid.
And that makes a headline, and all of this, us city folks, I live in a city, I'm going to look at it, oh, look at what those guys are doing, geez, we need to regulate them, and so, we're always out trying to educate people, general public as well, but also the grower community. We're all human. We all will make mistakes.
Yeah.
But that, it only when it's certain level, there are going to be ramifications associated with that.
My dad regularly renewed his pesticide license because he wanted to. Now, you guys still do that.
Correct.
You still. So what does that mean?
I bet you that's again something people aren't even aware of.
Right.
When the EPA registered pesticides, we talked about, they do this risk-benefit analysis. They will also find that some pesticides, there's still more risk associated with that. So what they do is they make that product, label it, it's a restricted use pesticide. And so restricted use because there's some risk that's at a higher level. So then if you wanted to use that product, you have to go through a certification process. And the certification process is you get education, then you go in and you have to pass exams to show that you're qualified to use these restricted use pesticides. So that's a program that people aren't even aware of. And then to maintain your certification, you have to take continuing education credits every year to ensure that you're staying up on whether it's pests or new label restrictions or new environmental concerns or whatever. Endangered species is a big deal right now. And so that's all part of this whole pesticide use program.
So that's why when I talk to my farmers, even though they're farming, they're not like working for a chemical company. They know a lot of these products because they talk about it. Like,
correct.
Is it because of this training that they go through?
Well, some of it is they probably use a product, but again, I talked about the Extension Service, which is awesome in the state of Arizona. They do a lot of training and talking about what products work, which ones, this is the best for this one's the best for that. Here's what our field trial showed. There's so much good information out there from those guys. So the ag community, again, they're smart.
Yeah.
They really are.
They're entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Have to be.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to give props to you while we're here and while we're talking to an audience. And by the way, we get more viewers afterwards. Like we might have, it varies. Sometimes we might just have a handful that join us for the live, which is this right now. And when I first launched this, I thought I'm going to get an influencer that he has social media presence. It was Trevor Bales. And we had 400 people join the live.
Okay.
Well, we've never hit that. Well, I take that back. I interviewed him again a couple of years into it, and I think we were close to that another time. So he's a social media influencer,
Yeah.
but where I get most of the views is afterwards when we leave it on Instagram, we post it to our website and stuff like that. And the reason I'm saying that is we also do videos,
Yeah.
and the whole thing is to just these quick tip. They're not. We also do reels on Instagram, but they're kind of like they usually are no more than 5 minutes. Sometimes they're only about a minute and a half. And I had shot out all the videos that and shared it with our audiences that follow our channels, and you get our newsletter. And I said, by the way, if you have any ideas of what we should cover, and you said, Julie, you sent me back an email, and you said, Julie, you guys should make a video on aerial application.
Yes.
And so I go, okay, Jack, we'll do it, but you have to help me put this script together.
Yeah.
So I kind of did the research, and then I ran it by you, and we had it back and forth about 2 or 3 times, and it was hugely helpful. And then I ended up with this great, and we don't really promote our videos, but they're there, and if somebody has a question, we can send them to a video so they can watch it.
Yeah.
That video has now had 17,000 views without us
awesome.
doing any. So thank you, by the way, and anything else like that. And I thought it was interesting that you had suggested that one. Was there a reason why you had suggested aerial application? In other words,
yes,
spraying either with drones. We mentioned drones, but you literally were talking about planes.
Yeah. Well, the reason I did, and this is long story. When my son was first born in North Dakota.
Oh.
And we had a field across the road from where we were living at the time. And we used to go outside and watch the plane spray. And it was just cool.
Yeah.
And because those guys, they know what they're doing, and we oftentimes, because they're planes, they make noise. We oftentimes get a lot of complaints about the planes,
sure.
and they drifted and all this kind of stuff. And my point was that these guys are highly regulated. They're professional in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, and I think probably what it was is somebody had said barnstormer.
Oh, that's right.
And I hate that term because the barnstormer, when you think of that, that's a crazy guy flying through the barn, doing these crazy things.
And they're not doing that at all.
Those guys aren't doing that. They're doing things the way they're supposed to, and they're highly professional and regulated.
And you kind of remember your son probably being fascinated about that when you were looking up in the sky.
Yep.
And so for anybody that sees this segment, you need to go to Arizona Farm Bureau's YouTube channel and look for aerial application. It is a fascinating video, and I can't take the credit for it because the idea was Jack's, and he helped me put it together. So based on that, do drones eventually replace these airplanes?
No.
Okay, how come?
Drones have a place, I believe.
Yeah.
And probably the urban ag interface, sometimes those are more applicable.
Okay.
You can't spray large areas with drones. It's just not intended for that. But oftentimes, if there are areas that are problematic, you can do it. And you can use drones for other things in agriculture. So if you
the mapping.
Correct.
Yep.
And so, drones are another useful tool for the agriculture community to utilize, but it is never going to replace aerial applicator.
Okay. Now I have this question.
Yeah.
I've been asking all of you division leaders for the Arizona Department of Ag. Tell us a story coming from your area that highlights the valuable work your team does. It could be something at the end of the day that made you and your team feel like, okay, despite all the challenges and crazy things that happen, it's worth it.
I don't have a woo type story. It's really funny, and I guess it's me individually as I don't have you have self-motivated, praiseworthy of yourself, and so it's just when I can help somebody, it's maybe not even with our program, if somebody dealing with some agency thing, and I can help them with their problem or help get them somewhere where they can get further direction. I mean, to me, that is true. It makes me feel good at the end of the day. I mean, we do other things, like we do Section 18s, which are helpful to the agriculture community when they're growing a crop. We got a new pest that is
Yeah, what
wasn't
is
here.
this Section
Oh,
18?
thanks for yeah. Section 18 is when you can use a pesticide that isn't necessarily labeled for a crop, and you can use it on that crop. You have to go through it's a long process. Again, the Extension Service usually prepares these big packets of information,
Okay.
submit to the EPA. They have to review it and say that the risks are acceptable, and that's something that will help an agriculture industry, cotton growers or whatever it is, to help get after a pest that they would otherwise would have a significant economic harm for them.
Okay.
So that's the kind of thing that I think most folks, oh yeah, they helped us with that, but that's not the kind of thing personally that is like, makes me do the happy dance. So,
well, and speaking of economic harm, so we are now a $31 billion economy, or Arizona agriculture, and one of the things that my gut tells me, if we didn't get to do, whether it's organic or conventional, efficient and effective and careful application of pesticides, we wouldn't have a $31 billion economy.
I agree, and that number just keeps growing and growing. Agriculture is important to the state of Arizona, and again, we like to eat our food, so
it's very important.
Yeah.
So interesting. What do you hope to add to and or improve for your division?
Well, again, we made some recent changes, and we'd already had some dialogue, but in our pesticide certification program, we talked about the certification of applicators. There's kind of a pest management side and an agriculture side, and
right.
and they're kind of on parallel lines, but we're trying to move those closer together so that it's more the same.
Okay.
We have some overlapping categories. We also, technology is, there's technology out there for doing some of those programs. If we can do electronic or computer-based testing, that would be nice. It would also help licensing, who has to handle all these things and correct the tests and all that kind of stuff. If we can do all this with computers, it would be nice. And those are some of the things at the top of my head right now.
Cool. Yeah, and especially if you again, a best case scenario where you could actually have more inspectors, but since you have the amount you have, any of those kind of improvements, whether it kind of can ramp things up. Do you ever see yourself the team being able to use some form of AI when it comes to inspection? Or is that, am I talking out there in the ether?
See, I got a lot of gray hair, so AI is, it's kind of like you're talking to my kids, but, right now, AI is still such an unknown, as a state agency, there's a whole lot of, holding this pretty close right now until they can figure out how it can be used. And, again, we have to make sure that we're being fair, not discriminatory, not doing all these kinds of things and take over the world. That's why, that's always my AI thing. But so right now
some things about it are kind of scary when you hear about it.
I'll never say never, because, at some point AI will be just another thing like so many things are today that were never even thought of years ago. So
my vibe is you like your job. You're convicted about it. Why? Tell me that.
As a kid growing up on the farm, it was really hard for me. And I'll tell you, we grew up in Minnesota, and so we were at God's will. And, when we had droughts up there as well, I mean, it stressed me out as a kid, And so as I grew up, I knew that I couldn't do that. I mean, as a kid, I was getting stressed out by this stuff, and I could see my dad and my uncle, as they're dealing with this situation. And so it's kind of a funny thing, because I have a degree in ag engineering. So I went to school, got my ag engineering degree, and then coming out of school, I got on as an engineer, and I was designing bulk pesticide handling facilities in North Dakota.
Cool.
But then the Department of Agriculture had gotten money to do this. So then after that, then I did some grant writing and continued to work for the Department of Agriculture, and slowly moved into where I am today. So
So it's like you loved it, but you didn't think, I just can't be a producer. But your heart was still here, and somehow
I wanted to help agriculture in some way that I could. I love agriculture. I am. I tell you, that's one thing. Again, I'm gray-haired, so I can start thinking about these things. It's truly a concern to me as a nation that agriculture does not have the respect that it deserves. we all need to eat. And until we can produce and protect the food that we have and feed our nation, it's a problem. And as an older American, I'm really concerned about it. I think about that. Most people don't think about the security of our agriculture and how we raise things and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I'm going to go to the grocery store. That's a real concern to me. And I'm hoping that in what we're doing, we are a regulatory body, but we're doing good regulatory work, which makes people go, yeah, I didn't want him to do that, so I'm glad you did do some regulation on that, because that's wrong, because that's going to be that headline that makes us all look bad. So.
Right. And you can assure me that the tolerance levels that we can take, if they're, again, whatever method of farming is being used, if that parts per trillion measurement instrument maybe found some trace of a pesticide, are you assuring me that I'm going to be safe, that I could eat that head of lettuce for 100 years if I get to live to 100?
Yep, you could.
Okay.
There are far bigger things to worry about. Go out and hop in your car. Drive down the road.
Today in the rain.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the risks of that are so much bigger. And again, there is scientific know-how that goes into that. People much smarter than me. And science will continue to evolve. And so with those tolerances, they are reevaluated every 10 years as well. So it's not like we set something now or something was set back in 1950 and we're still living with that. That's been reevaluated and those tolerances have been reset. So again, science will continue to evolve, but continue to eat your vegetables. They're safe. Continue to eat your fruits. It's all good.
Oh, awesome. And you know what? You may have answered the last question I've also been asking every one of the division leaders, such as yourself. If you had a podium and, you guys have been averaging anywhere from 800 to 900 views on these Department of Ag.
Well, we're going for 1,000 with this one then.
Okay, we're going to do 1,000. So just imagine that's an auditorium of 1,000 people. What are you going to tell consumers? Again, you may have stated it earlier.
No, I think that's a great way to end, because it gives me the opportunity. I want people to realize that the Department of Agriculture, we're out there. And we're doing these consumer protection things that we're doing, making sure that the feed, seed, fertilizer, and pesticides are as you believe. What you're reading on that label is what you're getting. That these pesticides are being used in the agriculture setting appropriately, in the non-agriculture setting, that those scales that are in the grocery stores, that the prices that are marked on these products, those are all being checked. And so we are there to help protect you as a consumer. And that's what we do in our division with the Department of Agriculture.
Awesome. I feel safer. I've described it a couple of times that you guys are like the shield between the farmer and the crazy things about life that attack us and want to destroy us, whether it's a pest or a virus that can literally wipe out a whole field of produce or something like that. So, Joel, did we have anybody that had any questions for us? Great. So as we continue this series, Jack, thank you so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate it.
Yes, and we have a few more of these, so stay with us in this lesson and learn about what the Arizona Department of Agriculture actually does for us and why it's important. Some regulation is good regulation, and I wanted to understand the department more, so that's why we're here, and it's turning out to be a fascinating listen and learn. Blessings to everyone. See you next Friday. We're going to be hanging out with Arizona Department of Ag again.